So pit, oh yeah, Yinzer crazy.
And welcome into a Yinzer Crazy special. We are so happy to have you joining us today. My name is Mike Nicastro. I am the co-founder of YinzerCrazy.com, the Yinzer Crazy podcast, and everything associated and in between with YC. And you know what? We have Penguins fever in the Steel City, of course, as the playoffs are just about to get underway. Yinzer Crazy reported the news a couple of days ago that the opener would be on Sunday afternoon at PPG Paints Arena, and the Pens are going to get set to host the Islanders to kick off what hopefully is a long playoff journey this Sunday at noon at PPG Paints, as mentioned. And to help you get ready for that and to talk you along what we hope is a really long journey, and our new special called Guinning is some of my excellent Yinzer Crazy staff. These two, you've probably read a lot of their content so far, so I'm happy that we can finally help put a face to a name. I'm going to introduce them for you here. We have Patricia Beninato. Hey, Patricia, how are you? And how excited are you for Pens hockey?
Hey, Mike, how you doing? I am super excited. It's always great when the Pens are in the playoffs, and maybe without the Islanders, but it could have been worse. It could have been the Bruins. So, yeah, but I'm looking forward to it, definitely.
Fair enough. I think playoffs at least are a good thing, and you can't always determine the opponent. But I think if the Pens could have hand selected anybody in the East, they probably would have picked the Islanders, especially over the Bruins and Caps. Obviously, I also have Luke Rinaldi with me. Luke has been another feature columnist for us. Has had some great content on the site. Luke, you win the award for best backdrop today. I think you even got me beat. It's a Penguins show, and I don't even have anything Penguins behind me. I do have this puck though.
Believe it or not, I only put a few of these things up for the show. Most of this is here at all times. So thanks for the intro there, Mike.
You got it. So we're excited to talk you guys through the playoffs. We're going to have an episode of Guinning every single week, at least until the Penguins are eliminated. And we hope that's not until ever, actually. But we hope to have this show obviously running for the next couple of months. I am going to have a rotation of 4 contributors to this show. You already met Patricia and Luke. You'll soon meet Brendan Labra, who's also a writer for us over at YinzerCrazy.com, and Alicia McKenzie, who's going to be helping out on the Guinning show as well. All right, without further ado, I've wasted enough time. Let's freaking get into it. The Pittsburgh Penguins, as I mentioned, are set to take on the Islanders this Sunday and what will be the start of an exciting playoff series. But first, I want to talk through the regular season a little bit with Yinz. What an incredible season. The Pens finished with 77 points, 37, 16, and 3, just like we all expected. No, I'm kidding. Obviously, plenty of turmoil for this team. They have a GM walk away from them. They have stars getting injured, things happening left and right, and they still win the East Division. Really, really impressive stuff, Patricia. What was your biggest takeaway maybe from the regular season, and who or what was your biggest Penguin surprise?
Well, as far as a surprise player I was very impressed with Evan Rodriguez. It seemed like every time he was on the line, and I know he shifted up and down during the season. I believe I tried to look it up before we got started, but I couldn't find anything. I think at one time when Gino was hurt the first time, he was on that second line with it's escaping me, but mostly he's done third and fourth. But it always seemed he was in the right place at the right time. He wasn't afraid to hit people, which is important on the fourth line, and he was just very dependable. He made a couple of really outstanding plays, and he did not make stupid mistakes. And for a guy that basically the Penguins kicked to the curb to Buffalo, and then it's like, nah, wait a second, come on back. We'll find a place for you. I think he fit in very well, and I was very pleased with him.
Yeah, I like that call. He was a guy that had to step up, obviously, in the absence of Evgeny Malkin for quite some time, and he was bumped up to a higher line and performed well with expectations that really weren't there. So an admirable job, certainly, from Evan Rodriguez. And you know what? Anytime you have injuries, obviously the supporting cast plays a critical role. You finish first in the East. It says a lot about what those guys are able to accomplish. Luke, how about you? Who was your surprise, and what were some takeaways from the regular season?
Well, first off, I do want to apologize to anybody that has read my columns before, because I totally threw the Pens under the bus at the start of the season. I think I said this was going to be a bridge year. I think think I may have underestimated them just a little bit. No, I'm very pleasantly surprised, obviously, with where we ended up. And I wasn't going into the season with very high hopes. With we had Tristan Jarry and DeSmith, who, don't get me wrong, very good goaltenders, but weren't very proven in the regular season so far. I'm very happy to see how they performed, and I'm happy to see how the rest of the lines performed. Brandon Tanev, he would have to be my most shocking person so far this season, who I just didn't expect anything of out of this season. I didn't really know about him until the season started. And, he's had some games where he looked a little wishy-washy, a little sloppy here and there, but for the most part, he just really performed. He was getting pucks in front of the net. He was scoring some good goals, and he got the all-star for me.
It's a great call. And as I mentioned before, another one of those guys who went out with injury for a little bit, came back sizzling, and hopefully is going to be 100% entering the playoffs here for this stretch run for the Pens. I think somebody on my short list, and there's plenty of candidates, you guys did a great job naming them, is Tristan Jarry. You said it, Luke. I think early in the season, many people were worried about the fact that Pens didn't have a proven goaltender and a guy with very little playoff experience who had played behind Matt Murray prior to the end of last season and the postseason. And he was shaky for quite a long time there, and really turned it around. And obviously you have to have great goaltending to win your division and have 77 points. So tip of the cap to Tristan Jarry as well for his success. Another guy I'm sure that helped his success, who I personally don't think has got enough credit, is Pens head coach Mike Sullivan. The amount of shit that this guy had to go through this year was through the roof. I mentioned it before. You have a GM walk out on you. You have stars getting injured. You're going through a freaking nationwide pandemic. And somehow you're keeping everything in check, this team together, and you win a division when people like Luke are out here telling you that you're in a bridge or rebuilding year. I don't think he's going to win it, but should he be the favorite for the Jack Adams Award? And I'll start with you, Luke.
So I'm kind of torn here. I was looking myself at other coaches around the league, and I'm impressed with a lot of teams right now. Florida Panthers, they impressed me so far this year. I don't think they're going to go far in the playoffs, but for them to make it, that's something that I wasn't seeing at the beginning of the season. I really do think that Sully had a great year, and I think that he turned this team that could have been something like I had predicted at the beginning of the year, that could have been a down season, maybe just go for some draft picks next year and hope for the best. But to win this division, I think he did an incredible job. But really, when I look at it, I think Rod Brind'Amour is going to take it with the Canes. Their record is comparable to ours right now, but the main thing with Brind'Amour is he's not been in the league for too long. He took the division, and it's the first time, I believe, since 05-06 for the Canes. And right now it just looks like his accomplishments in the last couple of years outweigh everything else, and this year has been his year. So I think Sully is deserving, but I think it's going to Brind'Amour.
Understandable. Patricia, weigh in for us.
I tend to agree with Luke. I mean, as far as Sullivan goes, any coach that can take a team from 5th to 1st in the division, missing one of their main players for most of the season. I mean, Gino, he was gone, he came back a little bit, and now he's kind of iffy now. But I do agree with Luke that it's Rod Brind'Amour's award to lose. He has done an incredible job with the Canes. I've actually, when I was living in Richmond, Virginia, I saw a couple Canes games, and they're a fun team to watch. They really are, and they have a very passionate fan base. And, everybody remembers Brind'Amour played for the Canes. So it's got that going, and there's this whole thing that's rolling. But I think we may touch on this later on about how the playoffs are going to progress in this year where everybody has just played within their division and hasn't played anybody else. So I think it's Brind'Amour's to lose, but it also depends on how the Hurricanes do in the playoffs.
Yeah, and you know what? I think that's another notch in Mike Sullivan's belt, is that you could argue the difficulty of schedule was much more challenging in the Penguins' regard, because they are, in a stacked division with the Caps, Bruins, and likes of the Islanders and Rangers, of course. So we kind of touched on that. We don't think Sullivan is going to win, but certainly deserving. Crosby is obviously always deserving of the Hart Trophy. I mean, he's a guy that every single year his name is going to be in that Vegas list of favorites in the top 5. It seems like Connor McDavid is a shoo-in, but I'll essentially ask the same question to you, Patricia. Is Crosby at the point in his career where he is being undervalued because he's so good? Does that make any sense?
Well, having been very fortunate to have watched Sid his entire career, yes, I am that old. When he first came out, he was a straight up goal scorer. I mean, just brilliant. He could just score at will. He and Ovechkin were a lot alike, excuse me, in that way. As he's gotten older, he has shifted more to a helper position. It might be a strange comparison, but I compare him to Peyton Manning. Peyton Manning can lift up those around him. I'm sorry, I'm married to an Italian. I talk with my hands. He improves those around him. And anyone who has watched, the players come and go with Sid, anybody that's on Sid's line automatically jumps up. I have no doubt that Gensel and Rust are as good as they are because they play on Sid's line. As far as the Hart, I mean, when you're a superstar, the name is always going to come up. But just like the Jack Allen's award is Brindamore's to lose, the Hart is McDavid's to lose. I've caught a couple of his games, and he is amazing. He actually looks a lot like Sid in his prime. And, it would be nice. I mean, I'll put it this way. I wouldn't be surprised if Sid's going to be top 3, but he won't win.
Luke, what would your top 2 look like?
Well, Mike, I kind of agree with Patricia here. And, we had the pleasure of talking to Peter King not too long ago. And one thing that really stood out to me in the Hall of Fame debate that we had with him, with the Steelers going in was there's this issue with a lot of people that they look at the team more so than they look at the player. And with Sid right now, I think you have to look at his own accomplishments. And don't get me wrong, they're great. But right now, Connor McDavid's outweighs his by far. He has more goals. He has more assists. Sid always has that talent. Sid will always be playing, like Patricia said, with someone like Gensel who rises to the occasion, who plays good with him. I think the downfall for Connor McDavid right now is just the fact that he's not on a team that's going to propel him to the cup. But the Hart, like she said, it's his to lose. And I think what we're going to start seeing here in the next coming years is, Johnny Hockey and McCann and all these different players that are coming up that, Sid's out of his prime now. And no matter how many awesome goals that he has, no matter what we're seeing, he's not putting up the same numbers that he used to, and he's not putting up the numbers that the superstars these days are. And the individual, I think, will eventually take it. So, unfortunately, I think it's going to be McDavid first, and then maybe Crosby second. Ovechkin could be in that conversation too.
All good stuff from the individuals who know it just about as good as anybody in the 4-1-2. All right. It's time. Let's get into the meat and potatoes of this all a little bit. Give the people what they want. And no, I'm not talking about the Hello Kitty mug, even though I think the people want that as well, Patricia. I'm talking about Pens Islanders. Of course, we're bracing for what hopefully for Pens fans is not a long series. And of course, as I mentioned, it gets underway this Sunday at PPG Paints Arena. The Pens and Islanders faced off 8 times this past season, and the Pens went 6-2. So they were successful against a team from Long Island this past year, but they hadn't played since March 29th. A lot has changed. Jeff Carter is now a Pittsburgh Penguin, obviously, and Anders Lee is out for the Islanders, which is a big deal. I'll start with you, Luke. What are some of your kind of bigger picture keys to this series?
So I like to keep it basic. I think every playoffs come around, and for some reason we can't figure out a goaltender, or we're having trouble on defense, or we just break down in a certain spot. And you've seen it in the last few years when we've been in the playoffs and we've just folded. I don't want to jinx the Pens or anything. I'll knock on some wood here, but the last thing I want to see is the last time we faced the Islanders in the playoffs, where we got swept. And we need to make sure that the attack stays up. We need to make sure that the superstars are producing. Crosby, Malkin, Gensel, they need to stay in good form. The last thing that we need is them to fall off and go through a slump during these playoffs. And that to me is the most important part. I think defense and the goaltending, that's going to be key, obviously, but in the last few years, we've seen that we just can't produce on offense. And if we can't produce on offense, then that's just going to be it for us. So I want to keep it basic. I want to say scoring, goaltending, keep it simple and keep it going.
Yeah, I like it. You don't always have to do these crazy quadratic equations, I guess, every time to break down a specific strategy. You're absolutely right. Sometimes it's just about your best players performing their best at the most important time. Patricia, what are some keys that come to mind when I say Pens Islanders potential 7-game series here?
They have to make the Islanders D move. If you've watched the Islanders for any length of time, you'll notice that their defense tends to stay right in front of the goal. They don't really move. Unlike ours, you see Letang, he's whizzing all over the ice. Dumoulin whizzes all over the ice. And that's why Sid has been so successful against them, because if you've watched him, he has a ton of points against the Islanders. I want to say they're like one of the top teams he scores against. And what he'll do is he can move around them and make them chase him, draws them off the goal, and then he goes in like behind the goal and can stuff it in. So if they can get the defense moving, if they can get them out of their comfort zone and have them whizzing around instead of just standing there going, come on, score on me, then they're going to score. Again, I agree with Luke. Everybody's got to step up as far as offense goes. As far as Jari goes, everybody's like, oh, well, he doesn't have a lot of experience. Neither did Matt Murray, and we all know what happened now.
Yeah, good point. That's a really good point. And it's actually something that I've made that same point many times, that I'm a little weary of Jari's inexperience. But everybody has to go through it at one point too, right? I think we said at the time, Fleury doesn't have the experience. Obviously got to the Stanley Cup championship and lost, later avenged that the next year against Detroit. But at some point, if you want to win, that experience is going to come maybe in the first round by beating the Islanders, right? And so it does have to start somewhere. That's a really good point. So I'm going to turn you guys into gamblers for a second here. I'm not sure if you are. I know maybe Luke has dabbled a few times in his day-to-day life, but it's no secret that this East Division is a gauntlet. It is absolutely stacked. The Penguins, as I mentioned at the top of the show, I think got the favorable matchup here, as it's nice to avoid the Caps and Bruins in the first round. You're going to have to play one of them and beat one of them if you want to get to the Stanley Cup Finals. Assess for me, Patricia, this East Division. If you were a betting person, who would you think gets out of that group of four? And maybe who is the biggest competition at the end of the day to the Pens?
Okay, I do see the Pens being able to win the East. I absolutely do. I would put the Bruins second because the Bruins had the Pens number all season. The Pens were beating up on the Caps, beating up on the Islanders, and hitting the brick wall when it came to the Bruins. If everybody is healthy, I don't know what the situation is with Tuukka Rask right now, but he is. I'll be honest. I'd actually like the Bruins if Marchand wasn't on the team.
You have to find a way to get that in there at some point. I love that.
Okay. Anyway, as far as the Islanders go, they're young. They're a really young team, and they're going to be in the mix for a while. I don't think it's going to be their year, obviously, because they're playing the Pens first, but they're going to be in the mix for a few years. I'm going to put the Caps last, not only because I hate them too, but they're old. With Ovechkin being out, we all saw that they're not that great. There's questions about Oshie right now. He's having issues with his hamstring. So I think the Bruins, it's going to be Pens Bruins. I'm almost positive. I would be very surprised if it wasn't.
Luke, do you feel the same, or do you think the Caps are a bit more of a threat?
I feel like the Caps are going to be scrappy. I mean, we'll segue into Tom Wilson in a little bit here, but they're going to put up a fight just like they do every year. I think Patricia brings up a very good point. They're beat up. They're beat to hell right now. And I don't see them being able to produce what they used to. And, with keep people out of the lineup, that's going to be very hard for them to get past the Bruins. The Bruins have been the second best team, in my opinion, even though the scoreboard doesn't show it. The Bruins have been the second best team in the East, and I think they're going to be another very formidable foe. And, I remember, I think it was 2010, 2011, watching Tuukka Rask just freaking stonewall the Pens for that entire series that we played. And that's where I get back to the basics and where I get back to hopefully these Pens and everybody else that plays against them can get past that, because the offense is going to be the key, and getting past the key goaltending, that's really where it's going to show. So I'm going with Patricia here. I'm going to say Pens Bruins for the East, and I'm going to say that the Pens take it, because I am a betting man here, and I did put $70 down for them to win the cup. So let's see how that goes.
I like it. And speaking of key goaltending, I don't want to get through a whole debut episode of Guinning and gloss over the fact that the Penguins are obviously going to have to solve Semyon Varlamov first before they even get to Boston or Washington potentially. Varlamov in this Islanders defense, I know the Pens had their way with them in the regular season, but you guys understand what great goaltending can do in the playoffs, right? Sometimes it doesn't matter who is around you or how they're playing. If you're not getting to past the goaltender or a hot goaltender, you're not going to win. We saw it a little bit last year with Carey Price. That Pens team just kind of, fell off of a cliff. But hey, listen, if there's one position in the four major sports that can control a playoff series predominantly from one spot, it's goaltending in the NHL. So I don't want to gloss over Varlamov before we start talking about too much about Pens, Bruins, and things of that nature. It won't be an easy task, but I'm with you guys. I think the Pens ultimately will get past the Islanders. I'll ask you in how many games in just a second here. But, Luke, I did want to follow up on a point that you mentioned. You wrote a really thought-provoking story for us over on yinzercrazy.com last week. If you haven't read it, make sure you head over to the site and check it out. It was about Tom Wilson. And about, obviously, in reference to the nasty hit he had on Panarin of the Rangers a little over a week ago, that's just resulted in craziness, for lack of a better word, in the NHL. Wilson is a guy that you argued for and against. You mentioned that the NHL kind of created this beast. I'll let you elaborate more on it. I don't want to steal your thunder, but I think you gave a good argument for both sides.
Yeah, and it's very easy to defend someone on your team in the NHL. I alluded to the fact that we defended Matt Cook for years in that article, and you're always going to take someone that sticks up for your team, and you're going to put them on a pedestal, because that's something that you need in the NHL, and it's a lack in the NHL right now. The title of the article was Goon or Goat, and Goon isn't something that you hear too much whenever you're talking about NHL players anymore. You don't have the fighters. You don't have the Georgia Slorocks. You don't have all of these players that used to stick up and defend and just get on the ice basically for those times just to basically set the other team straight. Wilson is a hybrid. He is someone that is feared throughout the NHL because people don't have someone that can stick up to him. And he's someone that is a menace too. I would never condone a lot of the things that he has done in the NHL. He's borderline criminal in some cases, and just the stuff that he's done alone to the Penguins, it's enough to make you sick. But you like to see that physicality back in the NHL. There's a lot of hits that he has had that are clean. He also can play the game of hockey, which you didn't have whenever you had the Goons back in the day. He could put up more points than Aaron Asham, Matt Cook, and Georgia Slorock all put up together in their entire careers that he's doing in 1 to 2 seasons. So this is a coveted guy in the NHL, and that's why I think the NHL wants to keep him around, and they're not suspending him, and they're not throwing him out, because he's bringing that physicality back to the NHL, but he's also justifiably playing the game, and he's playing it well enough to earn a roster spot, even if he wasn't this good. So, there's a lot of different things that you can say about the guy. There's a lot of different hits that you can bring up in the career, and there's a lot of things that I don't agree with that he's done in the past. But the simple fact of the matter is, if teams don't start bringing in their own players like this, and I know people aren't really being trained in college and youth sports to come up as this kind of very physical, very tough person, because it's moving towards a skill game. But if we don't start seeing people that can challenge him, Ryan Reeves is pretty much the only person that comes to mind that can contest him right now. And how many times a year do they even see each other? So what the NHL, and what the NHL needs to do, in my opinion, is they need to really discipline Tom Wilson in the times that he does do these completely out of line, irrational, criminal hits, but at the same time promote the play that, hey, we need these guys that are bringing the toughness. People still like fighting. People still like these big hits. They just want to keep it so that the superstars aren't hurt and they're not beating the shit out of each other basically on the ice all the time. So I think there's a middle ground that can be had. It just needs to be found soon, or Tom Wilson is just going to keep doing what he's doing.
Yep. And I think, as I said, it's a thought-provoking piece. I want you to check it out on yinzercrazy.com. I don't want to beat a dead horse and continue to talk about Tom Wilson. I don't
That's not fair. I had a whole thing ready.
No. You know what, Patricia, I'll give it to you, but I almost don't want to give him the satisfaction, not that he's going to be watching, maybe he'll tune in, of him taking up X amount of time on our first episode of Guinning. But of course, I'll let you wait.
Well, I'm only going to talk from him for a second, because if you've read my live tweets, my general opinion is fuck Tom Wilson. But I do agree with Luke. And that is what is so frustrating about Wilson when you watch him. And, being in that area, I went to Caps games. I've had an opportunity to watch him. He is a good player. He can score, plays, he's very good. Why does he feel the need to goon it up? Enforcers are pretty much history in the NHL right now. They're really not needed anymore. I'm old enough to remember the days of Wayne Gretzky when he had first Dave Semenko and then Marty McSorley. But they had to protect him because Gretzky is a fairly little guy. Georges Laraque was here when Sid first came up. But Sid, he comes from a different era. He's also bigger. Sid proved pretty quickly that he could take care of himself. I did not feel that the punishment was enough. I do agree with Luke that it should have been more, but to kind of say, let's bring enforcing back, I'd really rather not. I'd rather see, nothing good with a good hit, nothing wrong with it at all. But when you have a guy who can play like this, like I said, he does not need to goon it up. Bottom line.
Yeah. I think at the end of the day, for me, there's a distinct line that can be drawn between enforcer and idiot, right? Enforcer and criminal. You could still be an enforcer in this league. You could still be somebody that has the back of all your guys and do it in a hockey context, right? It's when the cheap shots come in where guys aren't even looking at you and you push their head into the ice and risk serious lifelong injuries as to where you cross that line of being a goon. And if Tom Wilson didn't have that extra level of anger, maybe we get him some anger management courses. I'm sure he's probably already enrolled due to the NHL. Then he would be more appreciated for his game, because he is an excellent player. And unfortunately for him, fortunately for some, it does get overshadowed by his antics. All right, we got just a few minutes left on our debut episode of Guinning, brought to you by Yinzer Crazy. We hope you're all enjoying it out there, wherever you may be, getting ready for the Penguins postseason, one of the best times of the year in the Steel City, of course. So, of course, I have to ask you guys some predictions. And yes, these are going to be held against you throughout the duration. And you know what? If we do have more episodes, that means the Penguins are still winning. So I'm assuming that we're both taking the Pens in the first series. I'll ask in a few sentences, and I'll start with Luke. How many games does it take to beat the Islanders?
I'm going to say Pens in 6.
Patricia?
I would also take Pens in 6.
All right, and then I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but if it is the Bruins or the Caps, we know it's going to be a challenge. I do want to finish on just one general, bigger picture question once more. A couple sentences. If there is a specific key, whether it's luck, whether it's something as black and white again, is their stars performing, a specific key that will have the Pens hoisting the Stanley Cup trophy when it's all said and done. And we can look back at this debut episode and say, you know what? Patricia nailed that key. They did just that. That's why they won the Stanley Cup. What is it for you in a couple of sentences, Patricia?
They have to stay consistent. Jari has the hot hand right now. There's no denying it. He's got the hot hand. If he can keep that going, that is the key to any playoff. If you go in hot, you need to stay hot. You can't cool off. I do think when I say 6, I think that's realistic given the Islanders, but it could be 5. You know, it all depends. You're facing a young team without a lot of playoff experience. You know, obviously they do need to get experience somewhere, but you know, you have a lot of players on the Pens that have been there before. It's not going to be a big deal, and you know, even Jari has gotten a taste of it. So as long as they stay hot. And I also think, you know, the best part about the playoffs is that somebody unexpected always shows up. You know, in 09, it was Max Talbot. You know, we're going to see somebody step up, and it's not necessarily going to be Crosby or Gino or Gensel or Russ. It's going to be, wow, where did he come from? Zach Aston Reese. Excuse me.
maybe your guy Evan Rodriguez. You never know. Let's see. Luke, what would it take?
Line consistency. I'm just gonna say it right then and there, just like I said with my basic stuff. Is, you know, the main thing that I want to see is I don't want the third line coming out and producing all the points, and you know the first and second line are, well, why are we getting shut out? Why can't we produce? You know, I know that the playoffs, you're getting the most bang for your buck on those lines, and you're trying to match up the best you can so that you're going to prevent those players from doing the best that they can. But if our first line, our second line, our third line can all start producing the same amount of points, and they can put up the consistency that they can, that's going to win the game for us.
I like it a lot. As Jim Carrey once said, and you know what, I'll go maybe a little off the board here, not too crazy. But I'll say the power play, and I think chances are few and far between in the playoffs, just because the game becomes a little less aggressive. Teams are less risky when you get down to postseason play. The Penguins' power play has been really good since Evgeny Malkin has returned over the past couple of weeks. So I want to see them carry that momentum into that unit in the playoffs and then maximize those opportunities, because they're not going to have 5 or 6 opportunities a game on the power play. The man advantage will likely come down to 1 or 2 chances here and there every game. So take advantage of those chances when you get them. Hey, we took advantage of this chance to bring you some awesome Penguins content brought to you by YinzerCrazy.com. I also want to shout out our terrific sponsors as well over at Steel City Wheelhouse. And how can I forget Case-Specific Meal Prep and Vince Rinaldi doing some great things. The most efficient meal prep service in the 412 currently. Check them out at csmppgh.com. And check us out at yinzercrazy.com. All right, guys, it's been a lot of fun. I hope you had as much fun as I did.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mike.
You got it. We'll do it again. Yeah, of course. I want to thank Luke and Patricia. You can check out their work weekly on yinzercrazy.com. Make sure that you subscribe to us on YouTube. This is where this is going to be dropping. It's just our channel, and it's free 50. It's not going to cost you anything. The channel is called Yinzer Crazy. We're going to have plenty of great content for you every week these next few months, and hopefully what will be a long, exciting Pens journey to their 6th Stanley Cup. We will see. All right, for the Guinning team, I am Mike. We'll see you next time.
So Pitt, oh yeah, Yinzer crazy. This is it right here, Yinzer crazy.
I know Yinzer crazy, but so am I. #1 sports site in the Berg, let me show you why. The latest stories and unbeatable podcast with your favorite athletes. You know you can't pause that.